Good afternoon and welcome to Closing the Gap, Minority Disparity in Indiana, the penultimate panel of a really exciting 2 days of the InnoPower 2020 conference Beyond 2020. We're so glad to be here today. My name is Molly Martin. I'm the director of New America Indianapolis, and I'm joined by Camille Blunt, the director of the Office of Minority and Women Business Development for the City of Indianapolis, Carolyn Mosby, president and CEO of MidStates Minority Supplier Development Council, and Stephanie Bothun, co-founder and vice president of strategy at Ascend Indiana. We'll leap in with our exciting panelists in just a moment, but I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors today: the Indy Chamber, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Businesses Initiative, Second Muse, the Mind Trust, Kepler Institute, J2 Medical Supply, and my colleagues at New America. What we're going to be talking about today is the fact that we know minority disparities and opportunity gaps exist in the state of Indiana, and that they are exacerbated based on your race and your gender, and sometimes your ethnicity. We want to talk about what the strategies for workforce and business development are to start addressing those disparities and closing those gaps. As I said, I'm with New America, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit think tank out of Washington, D.C., but I direct work right here in Indiana, and we focus on racial and economic equity and justice. I hope you'll engage with us in the chat today. I'm about to have my panelists introduce themselves so we can get started. I will be going over to the chat to share with you links to the panelists' home organizations and some resources on workforce and business development. I'd like to start today with Carolyn Mosby, if I might. Carolyn, would you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization and what you think your organization's role is in addressing minority and other disparities in Indiana?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I am president of the MidStates Minority Supplier Development Council. We are part of a national organization, which is the National Minority Supplier Development Council, and we exist to connect corporations to qualified, certified minority businesses so that they can take advantage of contracting opportunities in corporate America. My particular council covers the state of Indiana, all of the state of Illinois, except for the Chicago area, and then I have half of the state of Missouri. And so when it comes to our responsibility, it is really helping corporate America identify suppliers so that they can do business together. And as a result, contributing to the economic base of communities, because our minority businesses are hiring and they're contributing to the economy. So that is our role as our organization exists.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So I heard you talk a lot about connecting folks to opportunity and the role that capital, social, and otherwise plays in that. Stephanie, I know that Ascend has a similar mission. I'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here, fellow panelists, Molly, and everyone else that has made this possible. So I'm Stephanie Bothun. I'm the vice president and co-founder of a nonprofit called Ascend Indiana. And I'm going to go into a little bit of context on Ascend because it's kind of unique. So Ascend is the talent and workforce initiative of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. And in 2016, we officially launched our pilot phase. And really with the vision of Indiana being a place of economic opportunity for all. So we did that in two main ways. At the time, we launched an Ascend Network platform, which is a tech solution and team of people that work to go out, meet with college students, 2-year and 4-year degree students to try to help them get connected to a job. We also work with businesses to break down their job descriptions and then create really high quality matches. In addition, we have a consulting team that goes out and works to create programs between employers, education, and intermediaries to focus on creating mutually beneficial programs that help individuals get into the good opportunities and jobs. But when we did our pilot phase, we found a few things that I think are really important to this conversation. The first is that Indiana's wealth-driving sectors are increasingly demanding workers with advanced skills. They need higher levels of education to fill the jobs that are creating opportunity. And we know that our supply of talent isn't keeping pace with that demand. There was a statewide goal of 60% of residents needing a post-secondary credential by 2025, and we know we just aren't there yet. So we looked into why is that, and so we kind of narrowed it down to, it's a lot of things that you all are talking about across this whole conference, but a few things that we focused on. One is that too few students are accessing post-secondary education. Too few students are persisting and completing their credentials in high demand fields. Too few individuals are able to find meaningful internships and that social capital that I think you're going to hear a lot about in this conversation, which ultimately can lead to good paying jobs. And so really, this is true for many folks, but really, as you all know, the misalignment is very clear for students of color, and particularly for students from low-income backgrounds. And so I have lots of statistics that we can talk about at some point, but we know across each of those areas that there is not the same level of opportunity for our Black college students, our Latinx college students, and particularly our students from low-income backgrounds. Ascend was really founded to help bridge that gap between students and employers, to really help those students build the skills, the work-based learning opportunity, and the social and economic capital that's necessary to get into our job market. So like I said, we have that platform, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing in response to COVID in a few minutes. But we've also been really trying to get our employers to think about how they're engaging intentionally with education to build programs that are going to lead to those in-demand career opportunities. So excited to be here to talk a little bit more today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So Camille, Stephanie talked a lot about building the appropriate pipeline for what Indiana needs. You focus a lot on supporting current pipelines and building new business development pipelines right here in the city. We'd love to hear more.
Yes, I'm Camille Bothun. Again, I am the director of the Office of Minority and Women Business Development. We are the arm of the office within the city that is responsible for certifying minority, women, veteran, and disabled-owned business enterprises. We also do outreach to those businesses and just make sure that they are skilled up, ready, willing, and able to perform city contracts. But we also take that a step further, and we try to connect our certified vendors with private contracts, as well as state contracts. We work very closely with the Indiana Department of Administration and the Indiana Department of Transportation as well. So we just want to make sure that our certified vendors are getting to those opportunities, that when those opportunities present themselves, that they are able to possibly form joint ventures that can help them grow their capacity. We want to help them be involved in mentor protege programs. And a lot of the things that we have been doing as an office, for example, we just conducted our disparity study. The disparity study was completed in January, and we are excited about the results of that and what we're going to be able to do as an organization. So shortly you will see new legislation coming through our city county council to hold bidders more accountable for what they're doing and how they're utilizing our minority businesses. And so we're looking forward to having things in place that will strengthen our program, and also to give it that consistency and follow through. And we want to be very intentional about the way that we are spending our city resources. And so like I said, we're excited about that. The study has not been conducted since 1995. Which is unbelievable. So we're thrilled with the outcome and what's to come for the office and the agency.
Thank you so much, Camille. Thank you, everyone. We're so glad to have you. Something that I think everyone on this panel and everyone who's been with us for the past 2 days knows is that the current crisis, the pandemic crisis, the racial justice reckoning in the country, these are not new problems. These are old news at this point. And for Black and Latinx Hoosiers especially, but certain other minority groups and certainly low-income Hoosiers, this was just an exacerbation of existing issues. And we also know that from an economic standpoint, we can't afford to ignore these things, that we are tipping in this country toward a white minority, which we know is an opportunity. This is a good thing. This is about cultural diversity and broadening our talent pool, but it is a challenge because current systems are not built to benefit the folks who are soon going to be the majority of our workers. We also know that if things continue as they are across the country, the median wealth of Black Americans and Black American households will be 0% by 2053 if we don't change things. So to build the educational and workforce prospects of Black Americans, Brown Americans, Latinx Americans is to save our cities and to save our towns. And I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you about what your individual organizations are doing right now to address the problem we were facing before and the COVID-19 problem we're facing now in terms of getting folks into pathways that will give them wealth and opportunity, but also get them back to work and get them back to producing income or holding business so they can support their families. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you because I know that Ascend and the city actually recently announced something that could be helpful, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. As I mentioned in my opening, when we started Ascend, we focused in on our college population, so our 2-year and 4-year degree students, thinking that that was an area where we could do a lot to retain students and help to start them off with that internship or job that would really set them up for lifetime success. And so when COVID hit, as you mentioned, Molly, I mean, the economic impacts have been devastating. So across the state, in Indiana, originally Ascend was created when there were supposed to be 1 million new jobs unfilled by 2020 because of the workforce. Now we know that nearly that same number are unemployed across our state. And if we look at the unemployment rate in Marion County as of July, we were at just hovering around 10%. And we know that more than half of those folks actually had less than a high school diploma. Beyond that, if we look at people of color, we know a higher percentage of our Black residents and Hispanic households have been affected by job losses. We know a greater percentage of our households were affected that are already making less than $50,000 per year. We know our youth, 18 to 24, are also disproportionately impacted. And we know that food insecurity across all those demographics has also skyrocketed. So to your point, we felt like we have to pivot and do something to try and support our youth and our residents in get reconnected to training and job opportunities. And so in response to that, Employ Indy, our workforce board, Ascend, the city, and the Indy Chamber all teamed up to really launch the Ascend Network as a free tool. And we opened it up to employers across education levels and individuals with various backgrounds, whether or not you have a college degree or not. We've opened up our tool to be able to allow job seekers to get individualized support, be able to get connected to that next job. So if you're on this, we're hoping that you'll help spread the word. If you go to www.employindy.org/rapid reemployment response, there's a very quick sign-up process. It's free. If you're a business and you need to hire for some different roles that you have open, please go there, signal to us. And we want to get your jobs on our network. We want to get individuals who are looking for a job connected and back to work. I think that, just to clarify too, one of the unique value propositions here is we are going to take jobs that are above $13 per hour, so that when people sign up with the network, they know that they're going to get access to jobs that hopefully are going to set them up on a path for being able to be more economically sustainable. $13 per hour is not enough, but it's a starting point, and we hope to have lots more jobs at that $17 to $18 per hour as well. This is critical that we also connect folks to the training resources. There's lots of education and training resources at the state level and at the local level for folks who need to upskill, reskill, or figure out how to switch industries into something that maybe they haven't done before. And we can help with all of that in this process. Kind of finally on this point, we just believe we must create systems to rebuild in our post-pandemic economy so that the folks who've been left out before, those are the folks who disproportionately are able to have the resources and the opportunity to be able to get the job or the training that's needed to create prosperity for them and their families. And we believe that Ascend, this tool, the partnerships that we're working to create with the community and others are just kind of a first step to create the infrastructure that's going to allow folks to be able to find those opportunities. And then also for our businesses, really to help them be able to share those jobs and get access to a very wide talent pool so that they can continue to fuel and grow their business after we get through this really difficult time.
That's an exciting tool, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And thanks to your partners. Stephanie, you hit on something that I think is really important. You hit on the fact that we need to make sure tools being developed as COVID-19 and racial justice responses make it into the hands and the households of people they were intended to help. And I know Carolyn will have something to say about this in a minute, but I'm actually going to first come to Camille, who answered a question in the chat, if that's okay. Camille, you work with the city, and the city has to pay very close attention to minority serving business development services, making it to very specific minority groups, because strictly speaking, I'm a minority, but let's be honest, I'm not really the person we're talking about here. And that has come up in the chat. I'd love to hear more about what's happening at the city, but I'd also like to hear your take on the role the city is playing and can play in making sure that this is not a rising tides lift all boats moment.
Well, I think that we definitely, as all of the racial unrest is going on in our country, a lot of the agencies and departments within the city looked to our office to see what we were doing. We were already doing the work. All of the things that we're doing were already in process. The rewriting of our business utilization plan was already underway. The receiving the results from our disparity study was already underway, and really analyzing those results and getting together as a working group to determine what we were going to do in response to that. So I think that, you know, we continue to push forward, addressing the issue that is brought up in the chat. There are a lot of loopholes, and we do see some bad actors that try to get in on our certification. And so we see that mostly in our women-owned businesses, where a business will put a woman as the front person, when in reality that business is being ran by a white man. And 9 times out of 10, that's what the case is, which makes it very challenging for women who are legitimately women-owned businesses, because we scrutinize them a little more to make sure that they really are in need of our program, because what we don't want to do is to give individuals an unfair advantage that should be given to the small businesses that we're trying to lift up and grow in our community. And when we're able to grow those small businesses, we're all going to benefit from that. Just those businesses, the economic impact on our communities, on our tax base, et cetera, are only to all of our benefit. And so we want to ensure that the people that are involved and participate in our program are legitimately minority, women, veteran, and disabled owned business enterprises. And we do all we can to ensure that that is the case. It is sometimes a challenge. We spend a lot of time, following the money, who invested in your company, who purchased things for your company, who, sits on your board, those kinds of things. And again, as I mentioned, it's a challenge. And so we continue to push forward. We continue to hold people accountable for what they say and what they have provided to us in their written responses. We also work very closely with other organizations to see what have they said to them. For example, we work with the Indiana Department of Administration. A lot of times people will mention, well, I want to be certified with the city, but I'm already certified with the state. And that's excellent, because if you're already certified with the state, we're able to use a lot of the documents that you have already given to the state for our certification process. All you have to do is sign off, and we're able to obtain that information from the state. And minus you still have to fill out our application, and you still have to provide us your tax returns. Those are the only 2 documents that you would need to provide to us. The remainder of that information we can get directly from the state. So that's a great help to our business owners, and it saves them on that process. It takes about 30 to 45 days for us to complete our certification process. So during COVID, it has been a challenge for us to continue to do that. We do on-site visits. So as you can imagine, we suspended on-site visits. We just recently began to do those. But what we're doing is cutting the time in half that we would typically spend in person with a business owner. We're doing more calls like this, WebEx, things like that, to ensure that we're speaking to them and asking them as many questions as possible through a web-based meeting. And then we go on site, and we're there for a limited amount of time. So just to share a little bit about what we're doing, and I'll pass it back to you, Molly.
That's really helpful. And thank you for the diligence. I don't envy you the workload, but I thank you for the work, for sure. And I think you put your finger on something that I suspect Carolyn's going to have something to say about, which is when you help minority business owners and you prioritize that energy and those resources, you do end up helping more people. What we know in America, helping predominantly white institutions first has not worked that way, right? So I really appreciate that you're targeting your energy. And Carolyn, you've had a front row seat for a long time for the conversation in Indiana about the evolution of diversity. You even have some family ties to some of the origins of the conversation in the state. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your personal take on the evolution of diversity in the conversation about supplier diversity, business development diversity, but then also what your organization is currently doing to try and address the COVID and racial justice pandemics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my relationship with minority business development goes back to when I was still in high school. My mother was actually elected official, and she actually authored the legislation that created the state of Indiana's minority business program. And at the time, the program was for racial minorities only. It did not include women or veterans or other groups. But over the years, that, of course, has evolved. And what it means to be a minority has evolved as well. And, you know, I think that the pie, as people have probably heard lots of people say, you know, well, the pie doesn't get bigger. You just have to figure out how to slice it, right? To serve all of the constituents that want a piece of the pie. And so we try to focus a lot on partnerships. And when you look at opportunities for minority businesses and some of the challenges that minority businesses face, like access to capital, and you referenced in your opening remarks about the growing population of minorities, and that by 2045 or 2050, minorities are going to be the majority in this country. So denying minority businesses access to capital has a negative effect on the economy. And so we need to be more diligent in making sure that we're providing that access to capital, but that we are also setting those minority businesses up to be successful. And when you look at a lot of states and cities, because we want to attract business and industry to our communities, and we offer tax breaks and lots of incentives to bring large corporations here. And we ask them to hire folks and do other things in the community. But the one thing we don't ask them to do is to make a commitment to spending dollars with minority, women, veteran, LGBTQ. I think that's a next step that should happen. And I've had some great conversations with folks at the state and the city level to look at how we can get to that point. There's some great examples of the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore that have similar programs like that. Because at the end of the day, my constituents, the minority businesses that we certify, want to do business with corporate America. So when a lot of those businesses move to the state or move to the various cities around the state, they're knocking on those doors looking for contracting opportunities. So how can we make sure that they're making a commitment to our communities to take a step even further to help grow the minority business base? We have a lot of corporations that are part of our organization here in Central Indiana, but across the country, that have stepped up and made a commitment, certainly in the light of what's going on with COVID. And we've been able to really capitalize on those partnerships that we have. Our organization also has a business consortium fund in New York. And so we've been able to raise money and build a fund for minority businesses. We've been able to do partnerships with corporations that are making financial contributions to our organization so that we can continue to train and do programming across the country for our minority businesses to make sure that they're able to make it through this crisis that we're in, but then also looking at the future to see how we can scale those businesses, because most minority businesses and small businesses are first generation owned. And so when you look at the future, a lot of those companies now, the people that are running those companies are looking at retirement or selling the companies, or maybe they want to pass them on to their kids, and their kids may or may not be interested, right? And so we want to make sure we have a pipeline in place as well for the future to continue to grow the minority business base in Central Indiana, in the state of Indiana, and across the country.
Excellent. So it's about supporting folks and helping them get started. Those are two ends of that pipeline. And we spend probably a little more energy talking publicly about getting people into the pipeline, but we have to get them to stay there and preserve that. I would point to some resources that both Camille and Carolyn mentioned that are early in the chat to better understand the different kinds of certification that minority businesses should and can pursue, and that those certifications are state-specific, federal-specific, city-specific, and that we have organizations like Camille's office especially, like the Indianapolis Black Chamber, like the Indian Chamber, and others who can help you navigate those structures if you're thinking of starting a business or already have. So one of the questions we got in the chat is about using business and workforce development to start to chip away at structural racism, to design these things so that they chip away at hundreds and hundreds of years of kind of entrenched financial and social practices that have gotten us where we are. That's a tall order, and I think we have 8 minutes left, so if you have the solution, now's the time to speak. But I think I'd love to come to everyone on the panel and ask you to just very quickly reflect on one thing you think Indianapolis needs to do. It doesn't have to be your organization, but that Indianapolis needs to do to chip away at structural racism. And I'll give you just a second to warm up, and I'll throw one in myself. I would like to see Indianapolis take a very critical look at the racialized costs of banking. That's a thing that I get really interested in and worried about, because regional banks dominate the Midwest. Our research shows that it is more expensive to maintain and open certain financial accounts. It's certainly more expensive to get credit, and it's definitely more expensive to get credit to start a business for folks of color here in the Midwest. So I'd like to see some strong action on racialized costs of banking. Stephanie, what would you like to see?
Oh, there's so many things I could talk about here. So I'll narrow down. So I think one thing we're talking a lot about at Ascend is how do we continue to elevate and highlight the lived experience of our college students, particularly our Black students, our Latinx students, and our students from low-income backgrounds, our first-generation students, to help to understand what are the bridges and supports that are really needed in order to help them get that first job, that first internship that's going to help them be able to break out of if it's a cycle for them, or just break through some of those ceilings that are created that we know exist in our process. So I think there's some great work happening for the Commission for Higher Education on trying to snapshot those disparities. I think we even want to go deeper and understand better what are those big barriers. And there's great work. We're partnering with UNCF. We're partnering with 21st Century Scholars, and we're trying to work through partnerships, Carolyn's point, to really help understand what that is so that we can be a better resource to help those students to break through. So a lot of things, I'll stick with that. I'm sure my fellow panelists have a lot of great insight on that question as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. Camille, how about you?
I think what I would like to see, I'm going to, as Stephanie said, there's so many things that we would like to see change, but I'll stick specifically to city-related things. And so as we think about construction projects in Indianapolis, what I would like to see is some of the large companies work with someone that doesn't look like you. I would charge them with taking a chance, being open to new businesses, being open to working with a business that may have some small deficiencies, being open to really just a point of working with someone that you're not necessarily comfortable with working with. I think we all have to challenge ourselves to not stay within our comfort zones all the time. And a lot of times we spend time only working with people who are our friends, and you may be missing out on an amazing business because you only want to work with your friends. And so that would be my charge, is to see those larger companies work with, number one, people who don't look like them, and people who, someone who is new that you've never used before. And that's the way we're going to see a lot of our small businesses grow within Indianapolis. And the last thing I would charge our large companies with is hiring interns that don't look like the rest of your staff. Bring them on, teach them what it means to be a professional, what it means to be in a work environment, what it means to come downtown every day, or to go on a work site every day, whatever that profession is. Give a young person an opportunity to really see what it's like to be in the workforce.
Thank you, Camille. And you're getting some thumbs up from the chat and folks nodding to mentorship and mentoring emerging business owners. That's great. Carolyn, how about you?
I would say, I think it would be great if we could continue to build the cultural diversity in our city. And when I speak of that, I'm talking about the opportunity for us to really experience other cultures. Because when you think about where racism starts, you know, nobody just wakes up one day and says, hey, I don't like this race or this culture. It starts someplace. And if you haven't been exposed to people and cultures and things that are different than your own, then you don't have the opportunity to grow. And so I would love for us to continue to expand what cultural diversity means in this city, and to really be diligent about ensuring that we are all having the opportunity to experience and learn and grow as a community, from various cultures. I think that would be amazing.
I can't think of a better way to start to wrap up. If you can believe it, it's already time. Time flies when you get the privilege of talking with three super smart women, and it's been my great pleasure. I do want to say to everyone who's on right now, I hope you'll stay with us, because while we are the last kind of panel, a group panel, you do have an opportunity to hear from Roland Williams, the founder of J2 Medical Supply, coming up next to do a keynote and then wrap up with Angela Freeman. And that will all be on this Zoom link. So please do stick with us and stay where you are. I want to take a moment to really thank Stephanie Bothun, Carolyn Mosby, and Camille Blunt for a really insightful, if kind of lightning quick conversation, because I know we could talk about this all day. I hope you will browse the chat and take a look at their organizations and their divisions and the guidelines that they've offered and help that they've offered to help you and yours find a place to start or find a way to maintain your post-secondary or business opportunities. I am so grateful to have been here. I'm so grateful for New America to have been invited to be involved. I hope you'll also reach out to me at martin@newamerica.org. I do want to thank one more time, and I want to make sure I get everyone on the list, the Indie Chamber, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Businesses Initiative, Second Muse, the Mind Trust, Kepler Institute, J2 Medical Supply, and thank you to my colleagues at New America. Thank you again, Camille, Stephanie, and Carolyn, and I'll hand off to the Kepler Institute folks because I believe it's time for Roland Williams.